Today I'm going to show you a 2003 drama film titled Evil. Be ready for spoilers ahead. The story kicks off with a young man named Erik engaged in a heated dispute with his friend. Suddenly, Erik starts assaulting his buddy while the rest of their friends stand frozen, too afraid to intervene. Erik has a reputation for engaging in brawls, which keeps them at bay. Later, the principal summons Erik due to his recurring misconduct, leading to his immediate expulsion from school. Upon returning home, Erik encounters further trouble as his stepfather intends to punish him for the school fight and subsequent expulsion. His birth mother is well aware of everything, but in reality, she doesn't care. She believes Erik needs to learn from his mistakes, so she allows the punishment to proceed. Later, his mother asked him to meet up with her friend Gunnar, who happened to be a lawyer. Gunnar handed Erik his business card, saying that if he ever found himself in any kind of trouble, he should give him a call. Erik, feeling a bit puzzled, just stared at the business card once Gunnar left. Erik's mom then expressed her disappointment regarding his expulsion from school. However, she delivered a surprising revelation. She had enrolled Erik in a new school, an all-boys boarding school called Starberg. She genuinely hoped that Erik wouldn't squander this opportunity and told him firmly that it was his last chance. Erik understood and promised his mom that he'd excel in school, graduate, and not let her down. Erik arrived at his new school, this time dressed in a uniform and sporting a fresh short haircut. His roommate turned out to be Pierre, known as the school's brainiac. They had a conversation and immediately hit it off because Pierre was a friendly and amiable individual. When evening descended, Erik and Pierre made their way to the dining hall. It was there that Erik crossed paths with another student named Johan. Johan revealed that every school had its distinct customs, and in this particular one, the treatment of students depended on their social status. Right after Johan mentioned this, a student sitting next to Erik was summoned by two others at the far end of the table, Otto and Gustav. The unfortunate student came from an ordinary family, while Otto and Gustav hailed from noble backgrounds. These high-class nobles took great pleasure in picking on students from less privileged backgrounds, like the guy sitting next to Erik. They acted as if they were above everyone else because their families held significant influence within the school. Furthermore, they were part of an exclusive school club that granted them the authority to discipline other students. Following dinner, Pierre inquired whether Erik would be up for a discreet smoke. Initially, Erik declined because he had promised his mother not to engage in rule-breaking. Johan, chiming in, cautioned that they could face serious consequences if caught smoking. Nevertheless, Pierre's confidence in their ability to avoid detection ultimately swayed Erik. The next morning during breakfast, Otto and Gustav summoned Erik. They claimed it was a customary welcome for transfer students and wished to acquaint him with the school's practices. Erik, however, flatly declined, leading to severe consequences. Otto inflicted significant harm on Johan, to the extent that he required medical assistance. In the evening, Otto and Gustav were getting ready for another prank on Erik. They summoned him again to their usual hangout spot and instructed him to tidy up a considerable mess of soiled shoes piled on the floor. Once again, Erik declined to obey their commands and left in frustration. An irritated Gustav turned to Otto, inquiring about what to do regarding Erik. However, Otto didn't seem overly concerned. He appeared quite relaxed and suggested giving Erik some leeway since he was new. Erik confided in Pierre about the situation, and Pierre's expression turned serious upon hearing it. He cautioned Erik against defying Otto and Gustav any further, as those who did usually faced consequences. Despite his earlier reputation as a tough guy, Erik insisted that he wasn't afraid of them and wouldn't follow their orders. Later in the evening, Erik and Pierre brainstormed strategies to handle Otto and Gustav's bullying without resorting to violence. However, it proved challenging since most students preferred complying with Otto and Gustav's demands rather than facing potential injuries. The next day, Gustav accidentally collided with Erik in a school corridor. Gustav insisted that Erik apologize, but Erik refused, believing that it was Gustav who had bumped into him by mistake. Gustav became enraged by this refusal and challenged Erik to a fight at a specific location later that night. Erik received the invitation to the fight from Pierre and Johan, who explained that Otto and Gustav never played fair. They would gather their friends and gang up on Erik during the confrontation. That night, Erik had initially intended to accept Gustav's challenge and engage in a brawl. However, he recalled his mother's advice about behaving well to graduate from school, so he decided against it. Upon returning to his room, Pierre offered Erik a cigarette to help him relax. At the fight location, Otto and Gustav had been waiting for Erik for a significant amount of time. When Erik failed to show up, Otto assumed Erik was too scared and started taunting him, with his friends cheering him on. The following day, Otto proceeded to call out the names of students who consistently found themselves in trouble and didn't obey the school's student organization, and Erik's name was among those called. During a school hearing, Otto, who was also the student council president, decided to discipline Erik with a full month of confinement. Additionally, they assigned Erik the task of digging a trench around the school premises that was 1 meter deep. Erik worked on these trenches late into the evening, causing him to have his meals alone in the dining hall. Following dinner, while Erik was having his solitary meal, a canteen worker named Mero approached him. She appeared to be quite intrigued by Erik and mentioned that he reminded her of her brother. Maro commented that Erik's attitude reminded her of her brother, who didn't appreciate being bossed around. After dinner, Erik proceeded with his usual quick smoke. Unexpectedly, Maro showed up and expressed concern about the health implications of smoking. She even discussed the scent of his breath. Then, unexpectedly, she kissed him and embraced him tightly. Both Erik and Maro were aware of the school's strict regulations prohibiting romantic relationships between students and staff. The penalties were severe, potentially resulting in expulsion for Erik and job loss for Maro. Nonetheless, that particular night, Erik and Maro seemed unconcerned about these rules. During Christmas break, Erik returned home, receiving a warm welcome from his mother. However, his stepfather was less pleased and promptly inquired as to why Erik had received so many punishments, including suspension. Erik didn't hesitate and told the truth, explaining that he had defied a fellow student who happened to be a noble and influential figure at school. His stepfather chimed in, emphasizing the importance of showing respect and compliance toward noble students. Given Erik's poor report cards and numerous school troubles, his stepdad decided to discipline him with another caning. Erik's understanding mother, knowing her son's struggles, chose not to intervene. After the Christmas break, Erik returned to school eager to reunite with Maro, as he had truly missed her. Erik and Maro finally reunited, sharing tender moments under the moonlight, alleviating their longing by being affectionate with each other. Aware that Erik had returned, Otto and Gustav devised another plan to play a prank on him. They opted to scatter dirt while Erik was asleep. Their tricks always seemed to succeed. Erik and Pierre woke up and tidied up their room, now covered in dirt. However, Erik wasn't willing to just let it go. He was determined to get even with Otto and Gustav. Gathering the remaining dirt, he quietly entered Otto's room and spread it around while Otto was sound asleep. The following day, during breakfast in the dining hall, Erik chose to create a commotion. He loudly asked all the students if they could detect a terrible smell. He then pretended to investigate the source of the odor by sniffing around, ultimately stopping in front of Otto, who was having his breakfast. Erik then announced to everyone that the unpleasant smell was emanating from Otto. This infuriated Otto because Erik was openly mocking him. Otto repeatedly punched Erik in the face, but Erik refrained from retaliating because he had promised his mom he wouldn't. Recognizing this, Mara quickly urged Otto to cease, as they couldn't bring Erik down. Otto and Gustav shifted their focus to Pierre, who was Erik's roommate and his sole friend at the school. Otto confronted Pierre in the dining hall, but Pierre declined, feeling he had no reason to answer to Otto's accusations. Otto, however, remained persistent and challenged Pierre to a fight after their last class, even resorting to threats if Pierre didn't comply. Otto and Gustav appeared to be intentionally targeting Pierre to provoke a reaction from Erik. After dealing with Pierre, Otto and his crew seemed determined to target Erik next to ensure no students dared to defy them. That evening, Pierre reluctantly accepted Otto's challenge and appeared at the fight location, though he stood alone while Otto and Gustav had their allies with them. Despite Pierre's utmost efforts, it became clear that he and Otto were not evenly matched. After only a few minor blows from Otto, Pierre found himself on the ground. When Erik eventually arrived, it was too late to intervene in the ongoing fight. He helped Pierre back to their room and tended to his injuries. Later that night, Erik crossed paths with Mara, and they spent the evening together. The next morning, Erik's concern for Pierre's well-being compelled him to rush back to their room. Surprisingly, the room was empty and Pierre had already departed. It was clear from Pierre taking his belongings that he didn't plan to return to school. In his absence, Pierre had left a letter behind, expressing his apologies for his sudden departure. He praised Erik as a wonderful friend and encouraged him not to give in to the unfairness perpetuated by Otto and his gang. Pierre urged Erik to continue the fight against the injustices that were all too common at the school. Determined, Erik decided to reveal his true character and resolved to seek revenge on Otto and his crew for how they had mistreated his friend and other students. He found Gustav in the dining hall and challenged them to a showdown in the arena, planning to confront them alone. Despite Gustav and von Schonen's intimidating size and strength, Erik realized that these two troublemakers were all talk and relied on their parents' influence. Erik confronted them directly, prepared to confront the bullies who had inflicted significant damage on the school. Erik, who had a touch of rebellion in him, managed to defeat them effortlessly. After dealing with Gustav and von Schonen, he turned to a surprised Otto. Erik warned Otto that he was next on his list. However, before teaching Otto a lesson, Erik headed to the school cafeteria, where a female staff member informed him that Mara had left the school due to being fired. She handed him a letter from Mara, and Erik was devastated by her abrupt departure, much like he had been when Pierre left. One of Otto's associates saw Erik receiving the letter from the female school employee and hurried to inform Otto. They burst into Erik's room, instructing their friends to search through Erik's belongings. Among the items they discovered was a letter from Mara. Otto read it and uncovered the secret relationship between Erik and Mara. Naturally, Otto used the letter as evidence to have Erik expelled from the school. He wasted no time in presenting the principal with this compelling proof of a significant rule violation. The principal swiftly called Erik and expelled him, without much consideration for the gravity of the Pierre's incident. Erik accepted his punishment with grace, but he pleaded with the principal to return Mara's letter, which was his only keepsake of her. However, the principal refused and locked the letter away in a drawer. Now that Erik had been expelled, he felt he had nothing left to lose and decided to seek revenge on Otto for all the hardships he had endured at Starberg. Since the school had already expelled him, he had no reason to hold back. Erik managed to track down Otto, who was walking alone in the woods, and confront him. Erik used a stick to intimidate him, causing Otto to surprisingly kneel down and obey Erik's commands without hesitation. Otto was in a complete state of panic and even offered Erik $110,000 in desperation to spare his life. However, Erik turned down the offer. As he prepared to confront Otto further, Otto broke down in tears, begging for mercy and even becoming physically ill from fear. Erik, moved by Otto's extreme distress, held Otto's face and assured him that he wouldn't take his life. Because he didn't condone Otto's harsh treatment of weaker individuals, Erik returned to school to collect his belongings. He recalled Gunnar's advice to reach out if he faced any issues at school, prompting him to contact Gunnar. Before long, the lawyer arrived at Starberg. Erik confided in Gunnar about his situation, and together they approached the principal, who was conversing with the teachers. Erik implored not to be expelled from school and requested the return of Mara's letter. Initially, the principal was reluctant, but when Gunnar hinted at exposing the case system and bullying among the students as well as the principal's involvement, the principal had no choice but to concede to all of Erik's requests. The student council led by Otto was ultimately disbanded. Erik was immensely grateful to Gunnar for allowing him to return to school and end Otto and his gang's control. He enjoyed peaceful days at school until his graduation day arrived. His mother was bursting with pride and joy over her son's achievements during his time at Starberg. However, his stepfather remained displeased as Erik continued to receive poor marks in his behavior evaluations at school. When his stepfather prepared to resort to violence, Erik stood up for himself and declared that there would be no more violence in their house. He removed his stepfather from their lives for good. Later, Erik reunited with Pierre, who was on his way to Geneva for further education. They part ways, vowing to meet again in the future. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this.